Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm your host, John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today. So this is a case that I originally heard of thanks to Twitter. An article has been written on this case, but I have to say, media is just drying up on this. This case is just about ready to disappear from the internet. So I want to try to help combat that. The tweet that I saw actually was from the sister of the victim. I've reached out to her. I've got a little additional information from her, a little bit of minor update stuff that I can give you guys by the end of this video as well. But we've got a whole family wondering what happened to their loved one. Who killed Julie Patterson back in 1991? Let's jump into this together. Here is an image of Julie, one of the few images that you'll actually find currently. If you do an image search on Julie Patterson, these don't even come up. So there's a few photos that we're going to see of her. This is one of them, but let's get to one of the articles that first mentions her. This is another article from 2019. It's not really focused on her case in particular, but it raises a bit of an interesting point, and it's a little bit of an intro. Also gives us a little insight into what was actually going on at that time. So this is an article that's actually from the Fountain Hills Times, and it's celebrating them being around for 45 years. It's written by the publisher, Brent Cruikshank. I hope I'm saying that right, Brent. And it was published on June 5th, 2019. I clearly remember a big story from 1991. This was the year Fountain Hills had its first murder, and the victim was Julie Patterson, a neighbor of mine. Now, after going through the research here, I believe he might be mistaken. I think this is actually their third murder in the area. It's probably the first murder since the town was incorporated. I knew Julie personally, as my parents introduced me to her because she was looking for a dog sitter. The golden retriever she had was really cute and a great dog. Julie traveled to Detroit for a few weeks, and I would go over to feed the dog every day since their house was only a few doors away on the same street. Julie returned from her trip on a late afternoon, and the last I saw of her was at my front door with her dog and a big smile on her face, handing me money. 2 days later, she was found dead in her home. This murder still has not been solved and may never be, but it was a story we all will remember if you lived here in 1991. I will always remember her as a kind person with a positive personality. And for the information that I can find about Julie, that is pretty much a constant. Everyone talks about this very outgoing, kind person, worked within her community. This is a community that this town is literally forming. The area was there, but the town is incorporating. There's a lot of business in terms of real estate that's starting to kick up around here. Julie's working in that field as well as some city commerce duties that she's doing on top of that. So by all accounts, I can see this is a person that was certainly contributing to their neighborhood and their community. And unfortunately, I say it on this show all the time, but we can't lose good people like that. Let's learn a little more about Fountain Hills, Arizona from Wikipedia. Fountain Hills is a town in Maricopa County, Arizona, United States, known for its impressive fountain, once the tallest in the world. And they actually have a picture of it here on the right. It can go as high as 560 feet with the spout of water into the air. The population is 22,489 as of the 2010 census. Now, that's as of 2010. Back in the 1990s, it was less than half of that. For 1990, they have the population listed at about 10,030 people. Fountain Hills was named after the towering man-made fountain in the center of town. It was incorporated in 1989, so we're talking only 2 years before this actually happened. Julie only moved to this area basically around the time that this town was incorporated. So she had only been living there for a few years herself. Now, where does this go down? It goes down on this street known as Love Court, and it looks like a cul-de-sac, just regular kind of neighborhood surrounded by a bunch of homes. I don't think there's a whole lot we can get from this except for someone that's pulling off a murder and trying to get away, they've got kind of one way in and one way out to that cul-de-sac. And outside of that, if you go the other way on Love Court, it also ends in a cul-de-sac. So you have to assume, if anything, that they had to be on Courtside Road and took that to Saguaro Boulevard. But yeah, just a regular neighborhood like many of us here in the U.S. live in. So what else can we learn? There's a few newspaper articles I've been able to find on this. Unfortunately, one of them continues on another page of the newspaper, and that page has not been captured. I've never had this happen before, especially when I'm pulling up archives on newspapers.com. But there is some information we can get from the first page, and we can see there's something that might be challenging the investigation right from the get-go. We can see it right in the title of this article. Fountain Hills killing overshadowed. Body found same day as slaying of Buddhists. Yeah, there was a terrible slaying. I believe 9 people were killed at a Buddhist temple, and that's going down at the same time as this. As a matter of fact, let me just give you, it's weird because this Buddhist temple story almost always comes up in the retelling of Julie's story, which I think makes sense, but sometimes it seems to pull the focus. So I don't want to go into it too deeply, but I want you guys to know what happened with this. The temple murders happened on August 10th, 1991. We had 9 people that were gunned down. Because of that, an investigative task force of about 60 people was assembled, including Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Now, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is the primary law enforcement entity for Fountain Hills. So there's some question of were they taxed at the time because of this mass shooting that had been going on. I think it's reasonable to think that might be true. There's some comments we're going to see later where they're kind of claiming that is not indeed the case. But they pulled together that task force, not just from the county sheriff's department, but the attorney's office, the Phoenix Police Department, the FBI, the DEA. It was a collaborative effort of many different entities. So that's not to say that 60 people came out specifically of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, but I'm pretty sure it was indeed a focus of theirs dealing with this. Now, what happened in particular with this shooting? Jonathan Duty, who was 17 at the time of the murders, and his best friend, Alex Garcia, who was 16, confessed to the crimes after a long interrogation. Garcia said he and Duty held the residents at gunpoint while plundering the temple. Garcia testified that Duty shot them all in the head with the .22 rifle, and Garcia fired 4 shotgun rounds into the bodies. Terrible, terrible crime. This information coming from ArizonaCentral.com. But that's essentially what happened at the same time that you have this woman's body found in her home. And there's some interesting questions that this article back at the Arizona Republic starts with. If Julie Marie Patterson hadn't worked late the evening of Thursday, August 8th, and if she hadn't been too tired to meet a friend for dinner as planned, maybe she would still be alive. So obviously she had plans to go out, decided to cancel those plans, decided to stay in, and this is the night that it happened. As it was, her death went almost unnoticed by the public. Her body was found Saturday, August 10th, the same day that 9 people were found slain in a Buddhist temple. So what happened here? We've got another article I'm going to lean on a little more for the details of kind of the physical scene, but there's another piece I want to share with you here. Dory Witchrig, also of Fountain Hills, was Patterson's best friend and the one who was supposed to meet her for dinner. Witchrig is at a loss to understand why anyone would want to hurt Patterson. Julie was friendly, easy to get to know, and an excellent conversationalist, said Witchrig, who met Patterson 5 years ago. She had created a good mortgage lending business and was a consummate professional. She was very open and a good friend. The article then goes to talk about the fact that Patterson had come from Grand Blanc, Michigan, and then it starts to get into her childhood, and it wants me to jump to another page, and the other page isn't there. I really wish I had that information because I want to tell you guys a little bit more of what type of person Julie is. Thankfully, her family is speaking up in some areas, so we will get a better sense of that as we go through here. This is a clipping from the Arizona Republic that was published in December of 2003. The newspaper article was originally published in December of 2003. Ifs are troubling in Northeast Valley case. So the when and the where, we know that it's at that address in Fountain Hills, not specifically that address, but in the 14600 block of Love Court. We know that it possibly happened either during the evening of August 8th or into the early morning hours of August 9th, and she had been hit in the head with a blunt instrument. The news of Patterson's murder stunned this town that has only had 2 murders since it was founded in 1970. The killer or killers had no trouble entering through a back door left open for Patterson's dog, as was her habit, and the front door was left unlocked. I have seen some other press, and keep in mind, this is very early 90s, just coming out of the 80s, and there's a lot of neighborhoods where you felt like bad things like this couldn't happen to you, and people would leave their front doors unlocked all the time. I know for a fact my family was doing the same thing. I had an uncle and aunt that lived across the street. They did the same thing. People would kind of come and go. That's just kind of what community was back then. Is it something you would do nowadays? Probably not. I think we're a lot more aware of what can happen. And it doesn't have to be because we're in a major metropolitan area. This kind of stuff can happen anywhere. This story kind of points towards that. We're talking about a town of about 10,000 people at this time. But let's go ahead and continue with the details. Her body was found on the sofa August 10th, the same day that 9 people were found slain in a Buddhist temple in West Valley. Crime reports show no signs of sexual assault. Okay, so obviously that is not a motive here. There was also no apparent burglary. So no sexual assault, no burglary. What is this crime about? Who went into this woman's home? They weren't looking to take anything. She winds up dead, and we really have no other cause or understanding why. Who attacked her in this brutal way, and why would they have done it? The family does say that a wooden golf club was reported missing by family members. And that's about all the details that we get in terms of what could potentially be a weapon. Now, a wooden golf club in the early 90s, and maybe some of you golfers out there can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a wooden golf club at that time is still kind of a classic golf club. I don't know if woods were truly made out of wood still in the 1990s. I know once I started getting into golf, which was probably about 10 years after that, even though they call them woods, they're not made out of wood. They're made out of graphite, aluminum heads, all kinds of different things. But so I'm wondering, was this like a classic set? Was this a set within her family? Or maybe it was just an older set that she would use to play herself. I don't know. But the family is noting that it looks like a wooden golf club was missing. Now, what I would love is to have some analysis, and unfortunately we're not getting this from law enforcement on this. I would love to have some analysis on the skull fractures that happened, and is there an indentation, or is there any way to understand the shape of the object that hit her, and could that coincide with a golf club? I don't know if a golf club would make a great weapon. I've seen some people throw golf clubs kind of in anger at a terrible shot, and I've seen these things snap right in half, and those aren't even wooden ones. Those are usually a metal shaft. But for a wooden golf club, I don't know. I don't know how feasible it is to really use that as a weapon. So I don't know how much we can lean on this in terms of thinking if that might be the weapon. However, there's important considerations if it is, because if it is, and we know that it's an item from her home, this is not looking like a pre-planned murder. You've got the person showing up. Would they know that she happened to have a golf club and they were going to get a golf club and use it? It looks like the amount of planning changes. So if there's less planning in this, if it's more of what I would consider like a crime of opportunity, did that happen because of a conversation that she had with someone that was in her home and they weren't real happy with? They saw the club and grabbed it, and in rage, this kind of happened. It's an important consideration. I just don't know that we have enough information to really lean on it that hard. But that's why I just wanted to kind of share my stream of thought with you guys on that. A Michigan native, Patterson was well-liked in the community and known for her willingness to help people, but she may have been in some sort of trouble. And here we get to a really interesting point that once again is pointing to the possibility that we've got some type of personal connection. I mean, if you rule out sex and you rule out money as the motive, and you're talking about a crime of this nature, you have to look at personal connections, and it seems like there might be something going on here. Patterson visited her mother a week before her death and planned her funeral. I mean, something's obviously wrong there. She is afraid at that point. She told her mom that she was destined to die, but could provide no specific details. She also asked her brother, a Michigan police officer, about purchasing a gun, but he talked her out of it. So look, we've got a woman definitely concerned. Seems like she might be in trouble of some kind. We know that she's working in the real estate industry. Is there something connecting here in terms of all that? Sometimes you've got big players with a lot of money. Sometimes the sources of that money isn't exactly on the up and up. Do we have something like that at play here? Another important consideration for this case, but once again, not a ton of information to lean on, except if we look at her intent. It's clear that she thinks her life is at risk. She's planning her funeral with her mother. This is a woman that it shouldn't be the age where she's planning her funeral yet. And she's talking to her brother about purchasing a gun. Patterson was involved with some questionable clients who had criminal histories, including charges of aggravated assaults and environmental violations against suspicious landfill businesses in Rhode Island. It was also common for Patterson to receive $100 bills for travel fare to other states where she met men, friends, some married. So this is getting messy kind of quick. First of all, we have this consideration about her questionable clients with their criminal histories. I don't know if that is fitting what we do know about this crime. Blunt force trauma to the head, found on her couch, all happened in her home, might have happened with an object from the home. I don't know that that's really a good match. If we did have some analysis where they said, no, we're pretty certain this wasn't a wooden golf club, we know that this was a different type of object and that object was not from her home, then for me that would change the premeditation that's going into this. And looking at people in that area, in terms of the business area with these people with criminal histories, would go up on my meter in terms of importance. But hearing this other aspect that she's essentially being given money, kind of large amounts of bills for travel to meet up with men, and some of these guys are married, that is a whole different aspect here. And that opens the door to a few different scenarios that I can think of. Potentially, if she was having a relationship with someone locally and like trying to develop a real relationship, but she was still going on these types of trips and meeting up with these married guys, she comes home and that person caught wind of it. They could have been very upset, had that fit of rage moment, reached for something in the house, and then we have something terrible like this happening. And the conditions kind of feel like that to me. We also have the possibility that if she is meeting up with married men, that the wives are finding out. And maybe someone followed her back to her home at that point, kind of cased the place out, was able to determine, hey, it's easy to get in the backyard. She always leaves the backyard open for the dog. There's just something about this. We know it's not a robbery. We know it's not a sexual assault. So, but it really just still kind of, it literally for me tugs at my heart. There's something about this that feels personal. And I think that's the direction that this investigation probably likely has gone. We don't have a whole lot of comments from investigators, but we do get one here in this article. The older the case gets, the harder to solve it. We need one good break. And that's R.J. Powers, the homicide cold case investigator, saying this. I'd like to be able to give the family some closure on this, and I won't give up on it. Someone out there knows something. I believe that's still true. I think there is someone out there that's sitting on details about this. I think there's other people out there that might have heard pieces of this and don't even realize they have a piece to this puzzle. So as always, contact information for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is in the description box below. Several different ways that you can contact them. Unfortunately, we do hear that they had limited evidence from the case, and in spite of new technology, they really haven't been able to learn anything from it. I'm not hearing the three little letters that I would love to hear in this case. DNA. there is no mention that I've seen in my research on this case about DNA. And that is probably another additional tragic aspect to this. If they had that, we would have all kinds of different options. Maybe they do have some form of it and we don't know, but no one has come out publicly with information about DNA in this case. However, the sheriff's office confirms it has a fingerprint from the scene of the crime that has never been identified. So there's something there. Essentially, if they could lock in on the right person, there's a piece of information that might help them confirm that they have the right person if that fingerprint is truly from the suspect. Jumping over to another article from the Fountain Hills Times, 25 years on, Patterson murder still unsolved. This is from August 10th, 2016. After not hearing from her all day Friday nor Saturday morning, friends went to her home early in the afternoon on August 10th and found her lying on the sofa, bludgeoned with an unknown weapon. It is not known whether she even awoke to see her attacker. Her dog was also apparently unperturbed by the deadly visitor. Patterson, 39, was a Michigan transplant who found Fountain Hills very much to her liking. She was considered bright and hardworking and had become involved in civic affairs about the time of the town's incorporation. She was a volunteer with the Chamber of Commerce and had taken on the challenge of organizing the Thanksgiving Day Parade. In 1991, the parade included a riderless horse to honor Patterson. One of the many other questions that persist over the decades is this: did her killer get away because of the resources of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office being overtaxed when her body was discovered? And of course, we've already talked about it. It's because of what happened at the Buddhist temple. But I do think it's worth pointing out, and we're going to take a little bit of a detour with this story. There are some other interesting issues that are going on with law enforcement in that area that might or might not be affecting this case, but let's stick with this for now. Detectives who worked the Patterson case at the time insisted that their investigation did not suffer because of the Temple investigation. There were a number of items of evidence, including fingerprints and material fibers, collected at the Patterson murder scene. What I would love to hear, another thing that I haven't heard in this case, is that like the material fibers, were they processed for DNA? Is that something that could be looked at now? There are a lot of technologies that have sprung up lately where samples, if there was DNA, samples that were previously too small to collect, now it's a whole different world. There's essentially ways that they add things to that to multiply the sample, and then they can extract the information on top of all kinds of different things. There's even at CrimeCon, I was talking to a guy about a technology where they're using almost like a vacuum. Imagine like a vacuum that shoots water on one end and then sucks it back up, and they're using that for DNA collection on certain surfaces. So there's all kinds of different technology when it comes to processing evidence. Knowing that they have material fibers, I would love to hear that that was being processed for DNA. But back to the article, these items so far have failed to provide clues needed to catch the killer. Detectives will listen to anyone with a memory of something from that time that might be significant to the investigation. Obviously, they're looking for more information. They're open to hearing from people. So what's this thing that I mentioned about the police department? Where, like I said at the start of this video, we have the sheriff's office being the primary responsible law enforcement entity in this area. So here's their mission statement. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, in partnership with our citizens and contract cities, will enforce state laws, deter criminal activity, protect life and property, maintain order, and operate a safe constitutional jail system. Under the command of the captain, there are 30 full-time deputies assigned to the town of Fountain Hills. They are assigned in the area of patrol, detectives, and community service. So it's interesting because I'm finding all this information kind of written from the law enforcement perspective. A lot of it is referencing Fountain Hills in particular. And when I was looking at it, I started feeling like almost like I was hearing an argument between two people, but I was only hearing one side of a phone conversation. It felt like there was a lot of information that was countering something, but I didn't know what that counter argument was. So I kind of dived deeper into it a little bit to try to understand it. And this is a post back at the FH Times, Fountain Hills Times, just from August 21st, 2019, so literally a couple days ago, there have been several letters advocating a Fountain Hills Town Police Department instead of contracting with the sheriff, Mcso, in order to save money. Now, let me just say, the way this thing is written, this is certainly someone that is a proponent of the sheriff's office. Proponents for a town police department failed to consider the additional infrastructure functions requiring new sworn and civilian employees. The startup of any police organization is a Herculean undertaking demanding skills unfamiliar to our town staff. It's extremely difficult and expensive to drop a functioning MCSO contract in favor of startup city policing. So obviously we have a conversation that's going on within this actual community about, should we keep relying on the sheriff's office and paying them for that, or should we kind of pull this in-house, form our own police department and start working it that way? And the sheriff's office seems like to me is putting out information where they're trying to support that you keep paying your taxes to us. We will keep working in this contract mode. But then I also found back at Fountain Hills Times references to something else that's going on around all this. This is an article just from a week or two ago, August 13th, 2019. The town council was to make a decision last night whether to impose a public safety fee on property owners in Fountain Hills. The proposal was an annual cost of $185 per property parcel. I don't know if they're talking about that being part of the property taxes that you pay, or if this is a fee outside of the property taxes. The way it's worded, I kind of feel like it's an additional fee. The discussion related to the proposed fee in recent weeks has brought attention to the cost of law enforcement and whether the town should look for ways to cut costs other than a contract with the MCSO. That contract is budgeted at about $4 million for the current fiscal year. And then they're quoting some things that the MCSO put out this kind of response almost. And that's another one of those documents where I'm like, I feel like I'm hearing this one side of the argument, but I don't know what the other side is. But this document is essentially why things should remain how they are. One of the points that comes up in that is this one: the sheriff's office has jurisdictional authority to assist all. These are law enforcement services that impact every community member in Maricopa County. If Fountain Hills created its own law enforcement agency, the taxes paid into Maricopa County would not change. Community members of all incorporated cities and towns are impacted by county services provided throughout Maricopa County. So it almost sounds like, the way that's written, like they're afraid that this contract could potentially go away. And then they're saying, well, by the way, no, we're still jurisdictionally, we're still there to help. We're still there to provide certain services. So your taxes really wouldn't change. Just all of a sudden you'd have additional taxes for bringing up the infrastructure of a new police department. I'm pretty curious about that. I've never seen this kind of go down in a community. But when you're considering something like this, is this affecting cases like the one that we're seeing? Would this have been different if it wasn't a sheriff's office that's responsible for a very large area, numerous communities, even though, yes, they have people dedicated to this specific area? But is that different than having a local police department? I think that starts a whole conversation we could do a whole separate video on. But I was looking for kind of something else to this argument, and I bumped across, this is a blog. This is why I always show you guys my sources, so consider the source here. But it's from June 1st, 2011. It says by Goldwater Institute, but there's an actual author's name at the bottom, which is Clint Bollock. And it's Is MCSO Ignoring Serious Crimes? And this is on a blog that is the Sonoran Alliance, Arizona's most popular and prominent political blog covering political news and events, commentary and information with a blatantly conservative worldview. We're an alliance of writers, activists, consultants, and government insiders. Okay, so we got the source considered. What is the information they're sharing? In a pair of reports in 2008, 2009, the Goldwater Institute documented a very disturbing practice in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, a persistent habit of declaring serious crimes solved and closing cases without serious investigation, much less arrest or identification of suspects. When El Mirage formed its own police department several years ago, so here we have another community that actually went and did that, it obtained dozens of files from MCSO in which serious criminal cases were closed with little or no investigation. More recently, according to ABC 15, MCSO itself reopened 500 cases dating back to 2005 and found that 400 lacked investigative work. If you're a family living in this area and you're seeing information like this come out, I imagine it is infuriating. And it's weird because, like I said, we have to consider the source. But it's clear to me with the responses that the MCSO is putting out to that one-sided conversation I keep talking about, they certainly fear or don't want this area to pull together its own police department. But when you're hearing stuff like this, cases might not be being processed correctly. Cases are effectively being marked closed when there's no resolution to them. That's pretty concerning. I would really, if I was a local citizen, I'd be digging into that a lot more. So two things have happened in the newspaper over this past month that are helping to kind of bring exposure back to this case. The first is someone sending in a letter to the opinion section of the Arizona Republic. The letter is titled, "A Plea to Help Solve the Murder of My Aunt in Fountain Hills." 28 years ago this week marks the anniversary of Julie Patterson's murder in her home in Fountain Hills. Sometime during the night of August 8th or early morning of August 9th, 1991, someone bludgeoned Julie to death in her own house while she was sleeping. Julie Patterson was 39 years old. Patterson was active in Fountain Hills and a well-liked member of the community. She served as a member of the Chamber of Commerce and as the chair of its parade. Julie Patterson was my aunt. Her loss has produced a heartbreaking void in our family for the past 28 years, and we miss her as much today as we did then. This unimaginable tragedy is compounded by the fact that after all of these years, the police investigation has resulted in large file, but still no answers. Whoever committed Julie's murder remains free. Our family has been in regular contact with the police and remains willing to help in any way possible. We have shown enormous faith in law enforcement and have been patient. We beg both law enforcement and the public to please remember Julie and use any and all available resources to seek justice for Julie. Written by Kelly O'Connor of Franklin, Tennessee. And that is absolutely part of the reason why we are sitting here talking about this right now. So I think that letter might have helped move some interest back towards this case, because literally just a matter of days after that, we have another article come out, this one written by Chelsea Curtis of the Arizona Republic, published on August 10th, 2019. 28 years later, family still awaits justice in murder of Fountain Hills woman. Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Bryant Venegas confirmed on Wednesday that the agency still is actively investigating the cold case. Patterson's killer has yet to be found. So that's an important distinction. I know with the criticism we were reading about from the blog, that was about cases essentially being closed and not investigated very heavily. I don't know if that's an exact match for what we have here, because obviously this case is still open. They're saying it's still actively being investigated. I could tell you the sister that I spoke to has some frustrations. We'll get into those a little bit later. She didn't quite have the same feeling that the niece had about law enforcement and them really staying on top of this throughout that entire time period. I mean, we're talking decades at this point. But back to the article. I do not know why the case remains unsolved. Our family is very frustrated with the lack of progress made. We have been very willing to cooperate with law enforcement and have remained in contact with them, wrote Kelly O'Connor, Patterson's niece, in an email on Wednesday. O'Connor was 25 years old at the time of her aunt's murder and considered Patterson as more of a cool older sister. The sheriff's office did not answer a Republic reporter's specific questions regarding details about Patterson's murder and the agency's investigation into the matter. A request for MCSO reports related to Patterson's murder is pending and could take weeks to fulfill, the agency stated. Sounds to me like they ran a Freedom of Information Act request in to try to get some of these files. I'll be curious to see what happens with that. It could be extremely hit or miss. In most cases that I've seen, miss. If they do provide information, it's usually heavily redacted, but a lot of times there are these, I don't want to say loopholes, but there are these conditions in the law where active cases that are being worked on in a certain way, don't necessarily fall into freedom of information because releasing that information could impact the case. So I don't know what's going to happen from that. But Patterson's body was found on August 10th by her best friend, Dory Wittrig, and neighbor, Dwayne Leonard, who both began to worry when Patterson didn't return their phone calls and missed a couple of planned outings. I didn't get that from the earlier article. I know Dory was talking about her, but I didn't understand that Dory was actually one of the friends that found her. Julie was discovered either the same day or the day after the Buddhist temple shootings. Her case was not given the same attention or priority it would have received if the timing had been different, said O'Connor. There may have also been some mismanagement of her case as well. So it sounds like the niece is kind of questioning what's going on with the case. Mismanagement of her case. That makes me wonder if that connects to some of the other criticism we've been hearing about how they are not processing their investigations very strongly. I'd be curious to know what the family knows that isn't exactly public information about how this case might have been mismanaged. But the author of this article was thinking that as well and actually asked for the details. It says O'Connor declined to provide further details about her claim that the case was mismanaged. Despite the frustration over the unsolved case, O'Connor also remembers good times with her aunt. Julie had an exceptionally good sense of humor, and she was well liked by everyone she met. She was everyone's favorite, O'Connor stated. She was loyal and could keep a secret. Julie made people smile. She was friendly and a lot of fun to be around. People naturally gravitated toward her. Patterson grew up in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and was the middle child in a family of 7, according to O'Connor. She was married once more than 15 years before her death and had no children. Patterson moved to Fountain Hills about 2 years before her death. Julie was the closest in my heart, other than my daughters, Pat DeLugo, Patterson's sister, and O'Connor's mother, wrote in an email to the Republic on Friday. Though these years have been long, I have missed her every day and cry for her death, and missing her, the pain does not go away. O'Connor has no guesses as to who killed her aunt or why. While Julie had visited my mom and me earlier that year in St. Thomas, I did not know any of her friends or much about her life in Arizona to have any idea as to what happened, she said. I strongly believe, though, that someone knows something and has either not been completely forthcoming to the police or has not come forward yet. I believe that too. And I want to give a very big thank you to Chelsea Curtis because essentially she tried to do the same thing that I'm doing here with this episode, pulling together all the different pieces and putting a more coherent, singular version out there that will hopefully survive longer because this media is going away. This case needs more exposure. Chelsea, you basically made this episode happen by doing this article on it and helping this family, giving this family just a little glimmer of hope. We're talking almost 30 years after the fact. So I really appreciate good journalists like Chelsea. So what do we do from here? Well, if you have information, you can go to mcso.org. You can call their homicide unit directly at 602-876-1087, or you can email them at mcso.major.crimes@mcso.maricopa.gov. If that's all too much to remember, I've got it all in the description box down below. Please, if you have information about this case, use it and send it in. So what did I hear from her sister, Mary? Well, Mary also told me about the family, very large family. Julie was the 4th out of 7. Mary was the last one. I think she called herself the Oopsie baby, if I remember right. She also says Julie was everyone's favorite. Whomever killed her also killed my mother. Mom never recovered from the heartbreak. It just took her body 20 years to catch up with the grief. I was 24 when I learned my favorite sister, my quote, other mother, was murdered. She is forever 39. Just really moving, and I'm so sorry that this family is facing this. It's heartbreaking that it's gone on this long, that you have these questions unanswered for this long. And then, of course, if you're questioning if the people that are there that are supposed to help you are really helping you, I think it just makes everything worse. And we definitely got a sense of that from the articles and the niece's comments. But what about Mary? Let's continue here. Investigators recently notified me that they have followed up on recent leads, which led to a search warrant. That sounds like good information. However, they didn't give her any more details. That's all we know. Some leads came in on this case. Other than her actual murder, what angers me most is the decades I spent trying to get someone from MCSO to talk to me. I sent numerous emails and left many voicemails, but no one ever responded. Finally, in about 2012, I was forwarded to a detective who actually responded. He didn't give me answers or promises, but he told me he was putting her case on his top 10. He was the first to actually answer emails and phone calls. I almost wish I had that detective's name, because once again, I just want to call out when people are doing the job, taking those extra moments to make phone calls to families to keep them updated. Obviously, this is that type of detective. I just can't believe that she had to wait that long for it. And once again, this is just making me wonder about that information that we saw from the blog. Just, is there something to that these cases aren't being processed very strongly? Back to Mary's comments. I felt he was making progress, she's talking about the detective, but then he was gone. We have had a few detectives since then, but he was the most sensitive to our family. Julie wasn't a saint. She was just a normal woman, living her life the best she could. As I recently told the current detective, I don't expect justice after all these years. I just want answers. Mary, we want your family to have answers too. So Brain Scratchers, I'm asking you guys, please help me raise exposure to this case. Please share this video, particularly in the Arizona area. That's where we need to focus. If you have friends out there, send them this video. Let them know about this case. Let's not forget about Julie. Someone out there has the information. And if you're the person sitting with that information, please find it within yourself to do the right thing. I promise you, you will feel better getting that called in and putting it in the hands of people that can act on it. And I know the family is struggling with MCSO, but MCSO, they're what we have at this time to deal with this case. So we need to do everything we can to support them. If you're a person that has the information, help this sheriff's office close this case out. Help them not only bring some answers to this family, but maybe even mend some bridges within the community. That's it for today's Brain Scratch, everyone. Before I end today's episode, several new patrons to thank, starting with Elaine Fernandez, Oscillating Detritus. I hope I'm saying that right. I looked it up earlier and it's so long ago I can't remember now, so I'm sorry if I got that wrong. Detritus, maybe. Sage Sorensen, Little Tum, Eric Gumble, and Alex Taryn. On top of that, we had pledge increases from Anna Anderson and Natasha Nemo. If you would like to support the channel, you can do that over at www.lordandarts.com. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Love those families. Stay safe. And I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.